The morning light filtered through the massive transparent dome of Helios 9 station and cast strange shadows across the lecture hall. Jake Park sat in his usual spot near the back row and watched his classmates file into the room. They came in all shapes and sizes. Some had 4 arms, and some had scales that glittered under the artificial lights. A few floated instead of walked. Jake was the only human in the entire medical academy, and sometimes that fact made him feel very small. Dr. Kalen Voss entered the room, and his crystalline skin shifted from a calm blue to an excited yellow. He was one of the best trauma surgeons in the galaxy, and his reputation extended across dozens of star systems. Today, he seemed particularly energized about something. Good morning, students. We have covered theoretical trauma response for the past 3 months. Today, you will see the real thing. The class buzzed with excitement. Lyris, who sat 2 rows ahead of Jake, straightened all 4 of her arms. She was a Quellan, and her species was known for precision and careful planning. Next to her sat Mordith, whose reptilian frame took up nearly 2 seats. The Scarix were famous for staying calm under pressure, and Mordith never seemed bothered by anything. Jake pulled out his datapad and prepared to take notes. Back on Earth, he had been a pretty good medical student. Not the top of his class, but solid, competent. When the exchange program opened up, he applied on a whim and never expected to be selected. Now here, he was sitting in a classroom where the equipment in the hallway cost more than his entire medical school back home. DR. Voss activated the wall display, and a 3-dimensional image of the emergency bay appeared above their heads. This is Emergency Bay 7. We have just received word that a critical patient is arriving within minutes. Mining accident on the lower cargo decks. The patient is one of our own. A young Velrun technician. The students leaned forward. Mining accidents were nasty. Jake had read about them in his xenobiology courses. The equipment used in zero-gravity cargo handling could crush a person in seconds. You will observe from the deck above. This is not a simulation. This is a real patient with a real injury. I want you to think about your response protocols. What equipment would you use? What steps would you take? Consider everything we have learned. The class filed out quickly and headed toward the observation deck. Jake followed along and tried not to feel out of place. His classmates spoke in quick, excited bursts about regeneration chambers and cellular reconstruction matrices, terms that still sounded like science fiction to Jake. Even after 3 months of intensive study, the observation deck had a reinforced glass wall that looked down into the emergency bay. Medical equipment lined the walls below. Devices that could rebuild organs at the molecular level. Scanners that could map every cell in a body. Regeneration tanks filled with biofluid that could regrow limbs in hours, instead of months. Jake pressed against the railing and looked down. Back on Earth, emergency rooms had heart monitors and oxygen tanks and maybe a CT scanner if the hospital had decent funding. Here the emergency bay looked like something from a distant future that Earth might reach in another 1,000 years. The doors below burst open and medical staff rushed in pushing an anti-gravity gurney. On it lay a young Velrun male. His crystalline skin flickered between gray and deep crimson. Even from up here, Jake could see the massive wound across his chest. Blood that looked more purple than red pooled on the gurney. That is Saurin, Dr. Voss announced through the intercom system. Age 24. Caught between 2 cargo containers during a loading malfunction. Initial scans show a laceration measuring 20 centimeters long and 5 centimeters deep. Damage to major lymphatic vessels. Internal bleeding. He has perhaps 1 hour before cascade organ failure begins. The students started calling out immediately. Lyris suggested using the Harmon matrix for cellular reconstruction. Mordith recommended a full regeneration cycle with stem catalyst injections. Another student whose name Jake could never remember proposed molecular surgery guided by the surgical AI. Dr. Voss nodded at each suggestion. Good. All valid approaches. Begin preparation for cellular reconstruction. Calibrate the regeneration chamber. Initialize stasis protocols. Below them, the medical staff moved with practiced efficiency. Machines hummed to life. Displays lit up with complex readouts. Jake watched the main monitor that showed Saurin's vital signs. The numbers were dropping steadily. Jake raised his hand. The movement felt small and insignificant in the large observation deck. Voss was coordinating with the team below and barely glanced his way. Yes, Mr. Park. The patient is losing blood very quickly. Will the chamber be ready in time? Maybe we could try something simpler first. Several students turned to look at him. Lyris's expression was curious. Mordeth just blinked slowly with his inner eyelids. Doctor. Voss's skin flashed yellow with what Jake had learned to recognize as irritation. Mr. Park, this is a critical trauma case. We use the best technology available. Please observe and learn from your classmates. Jake felt his face grow warm, but he sat back down. Below in the emergency bay, Saurin's crystalline skin flickered more weakly. The crimson color was fading to a dull gray. The medical staff worked quickly, but the machines needed time. Time to calibrate. Time to load genetic profiles. Time to initialize complex systems. 15 minutes, the lead surgeon called out. We need 15 minutes for full calibration. Monitor his blood pressure closely. Voss responded. Prepare backup stasis if needed. Jake watched the clock on the wall display. He watched the vital signs dropping on the monitor. He looked down at Saurin's still form on the gurney. 15 minutes seemed like a very long time. Back on Earth, when someone was bleeding out, you did not wait 15 minutes for a machine to calibrate. You stopped the bleeding first. You stopped it fast, and you stopped it with whatever you had available. But this was not Earth. This was the most advanced medical facility in the known galaxy. These people had technology that could rebuild a body from the molecular level up. They had tools that could scan and repair damage that human doctors could only dream about. Jake looked at his datapad. He had downloaded some Earth medical texts when he first arrived. Old texts. Basic field surgery manuals. Wilderness medicine guides. Things that seemed primitive compared to what surrounded him here. He had kept them mostly out of nostalgia. A reminder of home. Now looking down at Saurin's weakening vital signs, Jake wondered if sometimes the old ways had value after all. Not because they were better than advanced technology, but because they were fast. Because they worked when time was running out and machines needed calibration. He glanced at the emergency supply station near the observation deck exit. It had basic supplies for dozens of species, including humans. Including the primitive tools that humans still carried just in case. Jake made a decision. He stood up and walked toward the supply station. Several students watched him go. He could feel their confusion. The strange human was doing something odd again. He opened the supply cabinet, marked for human emergencies, and found what he was looking for. A basic medical kit. Inside was a curved needle, surgical thread, antiseptic solution, clamps, tools that had been used on Earth for thousands of years. Tools that needed no power source and no calibration time. Jake looked down at the emergency bay one more time. 10 minutes had passed. Saurin's vital signs were dropping faster now. The stasis field was having trouble initializing. Some kind of compatibility issue that the staff was rushing to resolve. 5 more minutes, they called out. Just 5 more minutes. Jake did not think Saurin had 5 more minutes. He walked to the access door that led down to the emergency bay level. A security officer stepped forward to block his path, but Jake kept walking. Behind him, he heard Dr. Voss call out something. Permission or warning, He was not sure which. All he knew was that someone was dying, and he had the tools to help. Simple tools. Primitive tools. But tools that worked. The security officer looked uncertain. His 3 eyes blinked in sequence as he processed what was happening. Jake Park, the small human student, was trying to enter an active emergency situation. This was against protocol. This was against every safety regulation in the station handbook. Dr. Voss had moved to the observation deck railing, and his crystalline skin rippled through colors Jake had never seen before. Purple mixed with yellow, mixed with flashes of orange. The professor was clearly conflicted. Standard procedure said no students in the emergency bay during active treatment. But Saurin was dying, and the equipment was not ready. Let him through. Dr. Voss finally said. His voice carried authority that made the security officer step aside immediately. Jake nodded his thanks and pushed through the access door. The stairs down to the emergency bay level seemed to take forever. His heart pounded in his chest. This was crazy. He was a student. He was human. He had no business thinking he could help when all these advanced doctors with their incredible technology were struggling. But he had seen wounds like this before. During his emergency medicine rotation back on Earth, he had worked in a trauma center in a rough part of the city. Knife wounds, accident victims, people bleeding out on gurneys while doctors worked fast with basic tools, because that was what you did. You stopped the bleeding first and worried about everything else later. The emergency bay doors slid open and Jake walked in. The medical staff turned to look at him. A veteran doctor with silver skin stepped forward. You should not be here, student. This is a critical situation, I know. Jake held up his medical kit. But I can help. I can stop the bleeding. We're stopping the bleeding. The doctor gestured to all the equipment around them. The regeneration chamber will handle everything. We just need a few more minutes. Jake moved closer to the gurney where Saurin lay. The young veteran technician was barely conscious. His eyes moved slowly, trying to focus on anything. His crystalline skin had gone almost completely gray. The vital signs monitor showed blood pressure dropping into dangerous territory. Look at his numbers, Jake said quietly. He does not have a few more minutes. The veteran doctor looked at the monitor, looked at Jake, looked back at Saurin. Medical training fought with pride, fought with desperation. Finally, the doctor stepped back. What can you do? Jake opened his kit and pulled out the supplies. A curved needle already threaded with surgical thread. Antiseptic solution in a small bottle. Clamps to hold tissue in place. Gauze to clean the wound. Tools that looked absurdly simple compared to everything else in this room. I'm going to close the wound manually. Stop the bleeding mechanically. Then his body can stabilize while your equipment finishes calibrating. The staff looked at each other. Above them, in the observation deck, Jake knew the students were watching. Dr. Voss was watching. Everyone was watching the human try something that probably seemed insane to them. Jake pulled on surgical gloves from his kit. He moved to the side of the gurney and examined the wound carefully. It was deep and ugly. The laceration cut across Saurin's thorax in a jagged line. Purple blood still seeped out steadily. Jake could see damaged tissue beneath. Could see vessels that needed to be closed. He poured antiseptic over his gloved hands. Then he began cleaning the wound area. Saurin moaned softly, but did not pull away. Jake worked quickly, but carefully. Every movement was deliberate. This was not the time for hesitation. What are you doing? One of the medical staff asked. Her voice was not hostile, just confused. Preparing the wound site. Jake explained as he worked. I need to see what I am working with. Need to make sure no debris is inside. Then I am going to use this needle and thread to close it. Close it how Jake picked up the curved needle. By stitching it shut. Like sewing fabric together. I put the needle through one side of the wound. Through the other side. Pull it tight. The tissue holds together. The bleeding stops. The staff watched in fascination. This was not in any of their medical texts. This was not taught at the academy. This was something primitive. Something from a species that barely had SPACEFLIGH. Jake positioned the needle at one end of the wound. He pressed the edges of the laceration together with his left hand. With his right hand, he pushed the needle through Saurin's skin. The Saurin's skin was different from human skin. More crystalline, harder. But the needle went through. Jake pulled the thread behind it. Made a knot. Pulled it tight. The first stitch was done. The wound edges held together at that one point. Jake moved down the wound. Another stitch. Another knot. The curved needle made it easier to work in the confined space. The thread was strong synthetic material that would not break. Each stitch pulled the tissue together a little more. Each stitch stopped a little more bleeding. The staff leaned in closer. They had never seen anything like this. Mordith's voice came through the intercom from above. He's manually approximating the tissue edges, using fiber ligatures to maintain closure. It is crude, but effective. Jake kept working. His hands moved with practiced confidence. This was something he knew how to do. Something humans had done for thousands of years. No power source needed. No genetic profile required. No calibration time. Just skill and steady hands. Stitch after stitch, he worked his way down the wound. The purple bleeding slowed. The wound edges held together under the thread. It was not pretty. It was not elegant. But it was working. His vital signs are stabilizing. Someone called out. Blood pressure is rising. Heart rate is STA. DYING. Jake did not look up. He focused on his work. About halfway down the wound now. His fingers moved automatically. Thread through tissue. Pull tight. Knot. Move to the next position. Thread through tissue. Pull tight. Knot. The room was silent except for the beeping of monitors and the soft sound of thread pulling through tissue. Jake was aware that everyone was watching, but he pushed that awareness away. There was only the wound. Only the needle. Only the next stitch. 3/4 done now. Saurin's breathing was getting stronger. The gray color of his skin was starting to show hints of pale blue. His body was responding. With the bleeding stopped, his natural healing was beginning to engage. Jake placed the final stitches near the top of the wound, each one careful and precise. When the last knot was tied, he sat back and examined his work. The wound was closed, sealed along its entire length by a line of neat, even stitches. Purple blood no longer flowed. The tissue held firm. He cleaned the area again with antiseptic. Applied a simple gauze bandage over the stitches. Then he stepped back from the gurney. Done. His voice was quiet. The bleeding is stopped. He should be stable now. The lead surgeon moved forward and ran a medical scanner over Saurin's chest. The device hummed and displayed complex readouts. The doctor stared at the screen. Stared at the stitched wound. Stared at Jake. This is remarkable. The tissue is holding. Blood pressure has normalized. All hemorrhaging has ceased. You have stabilized him with nothing but manual closure. Jake pulled off his gloves. It is just basic field surgery. We use it on Earth when advanced facilities are not available, or when the injury does not need more complex intervention. Sometimes the simple solution works best. Dr. Voss entered the emergency bay. His skin was now a steady gold color that Jake had learned meant respect or admiration. He approached the gurney and examined Saurin carefully. Ran his own scanner over the wound. Mr. Park, the professor said slowly, you may have just saved this young man's life. Our equipment would have been ready eventually. But you are correct. He did not have that much time. Jake felt relief wash over him. relief and exhaustion. His hands were shaking slightly now that the adrenaline was fading. He had just performed surgery in an alien emergency bay using techniques that were thousands of years old. And it had worked. Above them in the observation deck, the students erupted into noise. Questions and exclamations in a dozen languages. Lyris was gesturing with all four arms. Mordith was leaning forward against the railing. Everyone wanted to know what they had just witnessed. Saurin opened his eyes fully for the first time. He looked down at his chest, at the neat line of stitches holding his wound closed, at Jake standing nearby with an empty medical kit. "Thank you." Saurin's voice was weak but clear. "You saved me." Jake smiled. "Just doing what any doctor would do. Taking care of a patient." The medical staff moved Saurin to a recovery room 2 hours later. They kept Jake's stitches in place. The of us made that decision after consulting with several other senior physicians. There was no need to remove them. The wound was closed. The healing had begun. Why interfere with something that was working? Jake sat in the student lounge, trying to process everything that had happened. His hands still felt steady, but his mind was racing. He had just done emergency surgery in front of dozens of witnesses. Used techniques that were probably considered ancient and barbaric by galactic standards. And somehow it had worked better than he could have hoped. The door burst open and his classmates flooded in. Lyris reached him first with all four arms gesturing excitedly. "That was incredible. How did you know that would work? Where did you learn that technique? Why is it not in our medical databases?" Jake held up his hands. "One question at a time, please." Mordith settled into a chair that creaked under his weight. His reptilian face was unreadable, but his voice carried genuine curiosity. "Explain what you did." "Step by step." Jake took a breath. "All right. What I did is called suturing. It is a method of closing wounds that humans have used for thousands of years. You take a needle and thread, and you literally sew the edges of a wound together. The stitches hold the tissue in place while natural healing occurs. But why would you sew tissue?" Another student asked. "Why not just use cellular reconstruction?" Jake leaned back. "Because cellular reconstruction requires equipment, requires power, requires calibration time. Suturing requires a needle and thread. That is it. You can do it anywhere. In a hospital, on a battlefield, in a remote village, in space. It works regardless of circumstances." Lyris tilted her head. "But it is so primitive. So manual. Primitive, yes, but effective." Jake pulled out his datapad and showed them images from Earth medical history. Ancient Egyptians used sutures 3,000 years before spaceflight. They used plant fibers and animal sinew. Later civilizations refined the techniques. Different needle types for different wounds. Different thread materials. Different stitching patterns. The students crowded around the datapad. They scrolled through images of surgical techniques that predated their civilizations. Simple drawings showing how to close wounds, how to tie knots, how to remove stitches after healing. "This is fascinating," Mordith said. "Your species developed complex medical procedures without any advanced technology at all. We had to." Jake explained. "For most of human history, we had nothing but our hands and basic tools. We learned through trial and error, through thousands of years of practice. We figured out what worked and what did not work. Suturing worked. So we kept doing it, kept improving it. But surely, when you develop better technology, you stopped using these methods." Lyris said. Jake shook his head. "No, we still use sutures all the time, even in the most advanced hospitals on Earth, because sometimes they are the best option. Fast, reliable, low risk. A doctor can close a simple laceration with a few stitches in minutes. No need for complex equipment. What about infections? Another student asked. Without cellular reconstruction, how do you prevent wound contamination? Antiseptics, antibiotics, keeping the wound clean. Jake showed them more images. We sterilize the equipment, clean the wound thoroughly, use medications to kill bacteria. The body's immune system does the rest. It is not as fast as your regeneration chambers, but it works. Dr. Voss entered the lounge. His skin was a calm blue now. May I see that datapad, Mr. Park? Jake handed it over. The professor scrolled through the Earth medical texts. His expression grew more thoughtful with each page. This is quite comprehensive. Your species documented everything. Every technique. Every variation. We had to. Jake said. Medical knowledge had to be passed down. Taught to new doctors. If we did not write it down, it could be lost. So we created textbooks, training manuals, detailed guides. Everything we learned, we shared. Dr. Voss looked up from the datapad. I owe you an apology, Mr. Park. When you suggested a simpler approach, I dismissed you. I assumed that human medicine was too primitive to be relevant. I was wrong. Jake felt uncomfortable with the apology. You were trying to use the best tools available. That makes sense. I just saw a situation where my tools might work better for that specific moment. The professor handed back the datapad. I would like you to present a lecture on this subject. The entire medical faculty should see what you did today. We have been so focused on advanced technology that we may have overlooked the value of simpler methods. Jake's eyes widened. A lecture. For the whole faculty. I am just a student. You are a student who saved a life today when our advanced equipment failed to act quickly enough. That deserves recognition. More than that, it deserves study. Over the next few days, word spread through Helios 9 station. The human student who used primitive techniques to save an alien life. Medical professionals from different species came to observe Saurin's recovery. They examined the stitches with fascination, ran scans, took notes. The wound was healing perfectly. Clean closure, minimal scarring. The body was accepting the foreign thread without issue. Jake spent his evenings preparing for the lecture. He compiled information on suturing techniques, history, applications, variations. He created visual aids showing different stitch patterns, demonstrated on synthetic tissue samples, practiced explaining complex concepts in simple terms. The day of the lecture arrived. Jake stood backstage in the main auditorium and tried to calm his nerves. Through the curtain he could see the seats filling up. Doctors, surgeons, medical researchers. Species he had never seen before. All here to learn about something humans had been doing since ancient times. Dr. Voss found him backstage. His skin glowed with encouraging yellow. You will do fine, Mr. Park. Just speak from your knowledge. From your experience. They are not here to judge. They are here to learn. Jake nodded. He walked onto the stage, and the auditorium fell silent. Hundreds of eyes from dozens of species focused on him. The small human who thought he could teach the galaxy something new. Good afternoon. Jake began. His voice was steadier than he felt. Today, I'm going to talk about wound closure techniques that my species has used for over 5,000 years. Techniques that require no power source, no advanced equipment, no genetic profiles. Just skill and simple tools. He activated the display behind him, and the first image appeared. An ancient surgical needle. A piece of thread. The most basic tools imaginable. This is a suture needle. This is surgical thread. Together, they form one of the most reliable wound closure systems ever developed. Let me show you how they work. For the next hour, Jake walked them through everything. The history of suturing from ancient civilizations to modern Earth. The different types of needles and why each shape mattered. the various thread materials and their properties, the stitching patterns and when to use each one. He demonstrated on synthetic models, showed them how to hold the needle, how to position the tissue, how to maintain proper tension on the thread, how to tie secure knots, how to space stitches evenly. The audience watched in complete silence. Some took notes on datapads. Some leaned forward to see better. Jake could see the realization spreading through the room. This was not just primitive medicine. This was sophisticated technique refined over millennia. This was knowledge that had value. Now let me show you the real advantage of this technique, Jake said near the end. He brought up a comparison chart. Time required for cellular reconstruction versus suturing. Power requirements. Equipment costs. Failure modes. A simple laceration that would take 15 minutes to prepare for cellular reconstruction can be sutured in 5 minutes. No calibration needed. No genetic profile required. If the power goes out, suturing still works. If the equipment breaks, suturing still works. It is resilient. It is universal. A doctor in the third row raised a tentacle. But what about complex injuries? Surely this technique has limitations. Absolutely. Jake agreed. Suturing works best for straightforward wounds, clean lacerations, surgical incisions. For complex trauma with massive tissue damage, you need advanced techniques. But for routine injuries, this method is fast and effective. It is about using the right tool for the right situation. Another question came from the back. Would this technique work on different species? Different tissue types? We would need to test that, Jake admitted. Human tissue and bovine tissue are different, but the basic principle should apply. Hold edges together. Allow natural healing. The needle size and thread type might need adjustment, but the concept remains the same. Questions continued for another 30 minutes. Jake answered each one as thoroughly as he could. Some questions he did not know the answer to. He admitted that honestly. There was still so much to learn about applying Earth medical techniques across different species. Finally, Dr. Voss stood up. His skin glowed bright gold. Thank you, Mr. Park. This has been enlightening. I propose that we begin developing training protocols immediately. Every medical student should learn basic suturing as a backup technique. The auditorium erupted in agreement. Voices from dozens of species, all supporting the idea. Jake felt a wave of emotion wash over him. He had come to this academy feeling small and inadequate. The primitive human among advanced aliens. Now he was teaching them something valuable. Something that might save lives across the galaxy. After the lecture ended, Jake was surrounded by doctors wanting to know more. Wanting demonstrations. Wanting copies of his Earth medical texts. He spent hours answering questions and showing techniques on practice models. Saurin appeared near the end of the evening. He moved carefully but steadily. His chest was bandaged, but the stitches were holding perfectly. He had come to thank Jake personally and to see what all the excitement was about. You started something today, Saurin said. His crystalline skin glowed with warm colors. You showed everyone that old does not mean useless. Simple does not mean ineffective. Jake smiled. I just used what I knew. What humans have always done. We work with what we have, and we make it work the best we can. That is exactly what medicine should be. Saurin replied. Solving problems with the best tools available. Not the most advanced tools. The best tools. There is a difference. The audience watched in complete silence. Some took notes on datapads. Some leaned forward to see better. Jake could see the realization spreading through the room. This was not just primitive medicine. This was sophisticated technique refined over millennia. This was knowledge that had value. Now let me show you the real advantage of this technique, Jake said near the end. He brought up a comparison chart. Time required for cellular reconstruction versus suturing. Power requirements. Equipment costs. Failure modes. A simple laceration that would take 15 minutes to prepare for cellular reconstruction can be sutured in 5 minutes. No calibration needed. No genetic profile required. If the power goes out, suturing still works. If the equipment breaks, suturing still works. It is resilient. It is universal. A doctor in the third row raised a tentacle. But what about complex injuries? Surely this technique has limitations. Absolutely. Jake agreed. Suturing works best for straightforward wounds. Clean lacerations. Surgical incisions. For complex trauma with massive tissue damage, you need advanced techniques. But for routine injuries, this method is fast and effective. It is about using the right tool for the right situation. Another question came from the back. Would this technique work on different species? Different tissue types? We would need to test that. Jake admitted. Human tissue and Voran tissue are different. But the basic principle should apply. Hold edges together. Allow natural healing. The needle size and thread type might need adjustment, but the concept remains the same. Questions continued for another 30 minutes. Jake answered each one as thoroughly as he could. Some questions he did not know the answer to. He admitted that honestly. There was still so much to learn about applying Earth medical techniques across different species. Finally, Dr. Voss stood up. His skin glowed bright gold. Thank you, Mr. Park. This has been enlightening. I propose that we begin developing training protocols immediately. Every medical student should learn basic suturing as a backup technique. The auditorium erupted in agreement. Voices from dozens of species, all supporting the idea. Jake felt a wave of emotion wash over him. He had come to this academy feeling small and inadequate. The primitive human among advanced aliens. Now he was teaching them something valuable. Something that might save lives across the galaxy. After the lecture ended, Jake was surrounded by doctors wanting to know more. Wanting demonstrations. Wanting copies of his Earth medical texts. He spent hours answering questions and showing techniques on practice models. Saurin appeared near the end of the evening. He moved carefully but steadily. His chest was bandaged, but the stitches were holding perfectly. He had come to thank Jake personally and to see what all the excitement was about. You started something today, Saurin said. His crystalline skin glowed with warm colors. You showed everyone that old does not mean useless. Simple does not mean ineffective. Jake smiled. I just used what I knew. What humans have always done. We work with what we have, and we make it work the best we can. That is exactly what medicine should be. Saurin replied. Solving problems with the best tools available. Not the most advanced tools. The best tools. There is a difference. 6 months after the transport ship rescue, Jake stood in his new office on level 5. It was small, but it was his. A desk, a workstation, shelves filled with medical texts from Earth and alien worlds. Through the window, he could see the vastness of space and the distant glow of stars. He was officially Instructor Jake Park now, faculty member of the Galactic Medical Academy, teacher of manual medical techniques. The course had grown beyond anything he imagined. What started as 20 students had expanded to over 100. Every incoming medical student was now required to complete basic suturing before they could advance to more complex subjects. The academy had even created a whole new department, Fundamental Medical Techniques. With Jake as its head, his datapad chimed. Message from Dr. Voss. Faculty meeting in 1 hour. Curriculum review. Jake grabbed his notes and headed out. The faculty lounge was full when he arrived. Professors from dozens of specialties. xenobiology, trauma surgery, pediatric care, neural reconstruction. They nodded to Jake as he entered. 6 months ago, they barely acknowledged his existence. Now they treated him as an equal. Respect earned through results. Dr. Voss called the meeting to order. His crystalline skin showed calm professional blue. We are here to discuss expanding the Fundamental Medical Techniques program. Instructor Park has a proposal. Jake stood and activated his presentation. The images appeared on the wall display. Over the past months, I have been researching other manual medical techniques from Earth. Methods that do not require advanced equipment. I believe several of them could be valuable additions to our curriculum. He showed them examples. Basic splinting for broken bones using materials found anywhere. Manual hemorrhage control through pressure points and tourniquets. Field triage systems developed during Earth conflicts. Wilderness medicine for situations far from medical facilities. These are not meant to replace your advanced techniques. Jake explained. They are meant to supplement them. To provide options when standard equipment is unavailable. To give medical professionals tools that work anywhere. In any situation, a professor of emergency medicine raised a tentacle. How would you integrate this into our existing program? We already require students to learn so much. Jake had anticipated this question. I propose a tiered system. Basic techniques like suturing remain required for everyone. Advanced techniques become elective courses for students interested in field medicine. Emergency response. Remote station work. Situations where they might need to work without standard equipment. Dr. Voss nodded thoughtfully. Essentially creating specialists in low-technology medicine. Medical professionals who can function anywhere regardless of available resources. Exactly. Jake brought up more data. I have been in contact with medical programs on Earth. They have offered to share their complete curriculum. Thousands of years of accumulated knowledge. Techniques tested and refined across countless situations. All of it freely available to us. The faculty discussed the proposal. Some expressed concern about diluting the focus on advanced medicine. Others saw the value immediately. The debate continued for over an hour. Finally, they voted. The proposal passed. Fundamental medical techniques would expand. New courses would be developed. Earth medical knowledge would be formally integrated into galactic medical education. After the meeting, Jake returned to his office and found Lyris waiting. She had graduated top of her class and was now working as a resident in the emergency department. Her forearms held a datapad filled with notes. I need your advice, she said without preamble. I am being assigned to a remote mining station. 3 months rotation. Very limited medical equipment. I want to make sure I am prepared. Jake smiled. This was happening more often. Students coming to him for guidance on working in low-technology environments. The galaxy was vast. Not every location had state-of-the-art medical facilities. Knowing manual techniques was becoming a valuable specialty. Show me the station specs. Let's figure out what challenges you might face. They spent an hour going over scenarios. What equipment she would have. What supplies to bring. What techniques would be most useful. Jay created a custom reference guide for her. Step-by-step procedures for common issues. All written in simple, clear language. All using tools she could easily obtain. Thank you, Lyris said as she was leaving. You have changed how I think about medicine. It is not just about having the best technology. It is about being able to help patients no matter what resources you have. After she left, Jake sat at his desk and thought about how far things had come. He remembered his first day at the academy, sitting in the back of the lecture hall, feeling small and inadequate, watching his classmates work with equipment that seemed like magic. Now he was teaching those same classmates. Teaching their professors. sharing knowledge that his species had developed over millennia. Simple techniques that worked anywhere. That saved lives when nothing else would. His datapad chimed again. Message from Earth, his old medical school. They wanted to know about his work. Wanted to establish an exchange program. Send more human medical students to learn galactic techniques while teaching their own manual methods. The idea was spreading. Jake composed a response encouraging the exchange. Humanity had so much to learn from the galaxy. Advanced scanning technology, genetic medicine, cellular reconstruction. But humans also had knowledge to share. Practical skills developed through necessity. Techniques that worked when technology failed. That evening, Jake gave a lecture to a group of visiting medical professionals from the outer colonies. They had heard about the human manual techniques and wanted to learn. The auditorium was packed. Doctors from species he had never encountered. All curious about what Earth had to offer. He demonstrated advanced suturing patterns. Showed them how to handle complex wounds. How to work in difficult conditions. How to improvise with limited supplies. The audience asked hundreds of questions. Took detailed notes. Requested follow-up materials. After the lecture, a Scarrick surgeon approached him. Her scales were deep green with age. She was old by any species standard. Experienced. Respected. I have practiced medicine for 60 years. She said in a voice that rumbled with authority. I have used the most advanced techniques in the galaxy. But what you showed today reminded me of something important. The fundamentals matter. The basics matter. We have become so dependent on our technology that we forgot how to work without it. Jake felt humbled by her words. That is exactly what I hope to teach. Not that technology is bad, but that knowing alternatives makes us better doctors. More prepared. More capable. The surgeon nodded slowly. Your species is young by galactic standards. You only recently joined us among the stars. But you bring valuable perspective. You remember what it is like to have nothing but your skills and simple tools. That memory has worth. News of the program spread across the galaxy. Other medical schools contacted the academy. They wanted to establish similar courses. Wanted access to Earth medical texts. Wanted human instructors to teach their students. Jake found himself coordinating a network of educators. Sharing curriculum. Training other teachers. Building something much larger than himself. Saurin visited Jake's office one afternoon. The young Velrun technician had fully recovered. Only a thin scar remained across his chest where Jake's stitches had closed the wound. He was back at work and doing well. I wanted to show you this. Saurin held up a medical kit. I carry it with me now. Everywhere I go. Basic suturing supplies. Just in case I am ever in a situation where I need to help someone. You taught me that being prepared means having options. Jake examined the kit. Saurin had put it together thoughtfully. Good needles. Quality thread. Antiseptic. Clean bandages. Everything needed for basic wound care. Compact enough to carry easily. This is excellent. Jake handed it back. You never know when you might need it. I hope you never do. But if the situation comes, then you will be ready. Saurin smiled. His skin glowed warm gold. I tell everyone about what you did. How you saved my life with techniques thousands of years old. Some people did not believe me at first. They think advanced medicine means only using advanced technology. But I show them my scar, and I explain that sometimes the old ways work best. Davos organized a symposium at the end of the year. Medical professionals from across the galaxy gathered on Helios 9. The topic was appropriate technology in modern medicine. When to use advanced techniques. When to use simple techniques. How to judge what approach fits each situation best. Jake gave the keynote address. He stood before thousands of attendees. Doctors, surgeons, researchers, medical students, all here to discuss an idea that humans had embraced by necessity. That the best tool is not always the most advanced tool. It is the right tool for the situation. He told Saurin's story. Explained how simple sutures saved a life when advanced equipment was too slow. Showed data from the transport ship rescue. Demonstrated how manual techniques provided critical backup when technology failed. Argued that medical education should include both cutting-edge advances and fundamental skills. The response was overwhelming. Species after species came forward with their own examples. Times when simple approaches worked better than complex ones. Situations where basic skills made the difference between life and death. Everyone had stories. Everyone had learned something valuable. The galaxy was beginning to understand what Jake had known all along. That advancement is not about abandoning the old. It is about building on it. Taking what works and improving it. Keeping the fundamentals while embracing innovation. By the end of the symposium, a formal declaration was signed. The Galactic Medical Accord on Fundamental Techniques. Every medical school in known space would now teach basic manual skills. Every doctor would learn to work without technology when necessary. The techniques would be preserved, taught, valued. Jake stood at the window of his office that night and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there were medical students learning to suture, doctors practicing manual hemorrhage control, emergency responders carrying simple kits that could save lives anywhere. Knowledge spreading, skills preserved, lives saved. His species had given something meaningful to the galaxy. Not weapons, not ships, not technology, just knowledge. Simple practical knowledge refined over thousands of years. Techniques that worked in the mud and blood of Earth battlefields, in remote villages, in disaster zones, in the vast emptiness of space. And that knowledge had value. Real value. The kind that saved lives when everything else failed. Dr. Voss found him there. The professor's skin glowed with satisfied blue. You should be proud, Mr. Park. You changed galactic medicine. You reminded us that simple does not mean inferior. That old does not mean obsolete. That the fundamentals matter. Jake smiled. I just shared what my species learned. What we had to learn to survive. Humans are fragile. We have no natural armor. No rapid healing. We needed techniques that worked despite our limitations. And those techniques turned out to have value far beyond Earth. They stood together looking out at the stars. Two doctors from different worlds. Different species. Different backgrounds. United by a common purpose. Saving lives. Teaching others. Preserving knowledge that mattered. Tomorrow, Jake would teach another class. More students learning to suture. Learning that sometimes the answer is not more technology. It is better understanding of what you already have. Better skill with simple tools. Better judgment about when to use what approach. The galaxy was vast. Full of wonders. Full of technology humans could only dream about centuries ago. But now humans were part of it. Contributing. Teaching. Sharing. Proving that every species has something valuable to offer, even if that value comes from being young, from remembering struggle, from knowing how to work with nothing but skill and determination. Jake turned from the window and sat at his desk. He had lesson plans to review, curriculum to develop, students to mentor, a whole department to run. But for the first time since arriving at the academy, he felt completely comfortable, completely confident. This was where he belonged. This was what he was meant to do. Teaching the galaxy that sometimes the best medicine requires no power source, no calibration, no advanced equipment. Sometimes it just requires knowledge, skill, steady hands, and the courage to use simple tools when complex ones fail. That was humanity's gift to the stars. And it was a gift that would keep saving lives for generations to come.